For 13 years, I had poured my soul into my father-in-law's business. My time, my energy, my ideas. Every ounce of devotion went into transforming a struggling company into an empire worth $85 million. It wasn't just a business to me. I had built it from the ground up, turning failures into triumphs, sealing deals others deemed impossible, and elevating my father-in-law's reputation to a level of prominence and influence. Yet, on that fateful evening, I sat at an opulent dining table surrounded by family members, masking the storm raging inside me. The moment those words left my wife's lips, everything changed. Your wife's new husband will now take over. Her voice was smooth, professional, practiced even. She spoke as though this were a routine business transition, another strategic shift in leadership. My father-in-law sat there, nodding in approval, his expression unwavering, as though this betrayal was nothing more than an expected course of action. I gripped my silverware, my knuckles whitening, yet my face remained impassive. I refused to give them the satisfaction of witnessing my anger, refused to appear like a discarded employee, deemed replaceable after years of unwavering commitment. I glanced around the table. The rest of the family carried on with their meal, their conversation flowing effortlessly, as if nothing of consequence had just been declared. Or perhaps they knew, perhaps they had always known, but chose silence, unwilling to challenge the patriarch's decree. That was how things had always been, and I had been a fool to believe otherwise. Foolish to think that my sacrifices would make me indispensable. Foolish to believe that loyalty mattered. Foolish to assume that my wife, the woman with whom I had built a life, saw me as her equal rather than a temporary placeholder. I turned to her, studying her closely, and in that moment, I saw what I had been blind to for years. She had never defended me, never questioned her father's authority, even when his rulings were blatantly unjust. She had always played the role of the obedient daughter, waiting for him to arrange the most advantageous situation for her. Now, she was promised to another man, not because I had faltered, not because I had failed, but because I had outlived my usefulness to them. I set my fork down gently, maintaining the composed facade that had carried me through countless high-stakes business meetings. They expected outrage. They anticipated resistance. For me to demand answers like a man oblivious to the game being played. But I saw the game now, and I wouldn't give them the reaction they were hoping for. Around me, the dinner continued, glasses clinking, laughter spilling through the room. But none of it included me. I had built them an empire, and they believed they could hand it over to another man without consequence. That night, I didn't sleep. Instead, I sat in my study, the soft glow of my desk lamp illuminating the meticulously arranged documents before me, contracts, agreements, financial records, each one a testament to what I had given to this family. They had taken me for granted, seeing me as nothing more than a workhorse, an expendable asset who had built their fortune while they reaped the rewards. But they had forgotten one crucial fact. A horse that learns to run without a rider becomes unstoppable. If they thought I would simply walk away from everything I had created, they were gravely mistaken. By 3 a.m, my laptop screen cast a cold light over my determined expression. Sleep had no place in my mind. I pored over every document, every clause, every agreement, my pulse hammering in my ears. The words from earlier still echoed. Your wife's new husband will now take over. Those words should have shattered me. They should have broken my spirit. But instead, they fueled something far more powerful. Resolve yet, instead of breaking me, their actions ignited something far more potent. A relentless determination to reclaim what was rightfully mine. For 13 years, I had been precise, always calculating my moves while my wife basked in luxury and my father-in-law upheld his image as a shrewd but measured businessman. I wasn't naive. I understood how power shifted within my own household, teaching me that loyalty was never guaranteed. The only person I could truly depend on was myself. That's why I had ensured my control over the company wasn't just a title. It was absolute, unshakable, and entirely in my grasp. As I pulled out the executive shareholder agreement, the numbers on the document reaffirmed the plan I had methodically set in motion over the years. 60.2%. I owned the majority stake. Not my wife, not my father-in-law, and certainly not the outsider they had handpicked to replace me. They believed they had outmaneuvered me, but they were blind to the fact that I had already laid the groundwork for my own escape route. They expected me to disappear quietly, but as the clock neared 8:45, I was prepared to remind them exactly who they were dealing with. When I walked into the corporate office, I did not carry myself as a man discarded, but as one who was ready to dismantle their carefully orchestrated coup. The lobby was bustling with employees, executives shuffling between meetings, staff glancing at me, some with deference, others with uncertainty. Did he hear the news? Will he resign? What's his next move? The whispers had already spread, but I paid them no mind. I wasn't here to entertain gossip. I took the elevator to the top floor, striding into my office with an unshaken resolve that sent ripples through the building. Danielle, my assistant, glanced up from her desk, her face unreadable despite the inevitable chaos brewing within the company's rumor mill. She had been loyal, sharp, and always a step ahead for nearly a decade. Placing my briefcase down, I stated calmly, "Schedule a board meeting for noon." She hesitated, if only for a split second, before nodding. Yes. My voice was steady, controlled. She understood. The battle had already begun. I was merely waiting for their next move. As I settled into my chair, I knew my father-in-law was already working to solidify his plan, rallying the board, persuading executives to accept his so-called leadership transition. He would leverage my wife's position, presenting the change as an inevitable evolution, a strategic shift in company leadership. Who would question a father handing his empire to his daughter and her new husband? The problem was, I wasn't just a name on paper. At precisely 9 a.m., my name was the one on the contracts that mattered. The door swung open without warning. My father-in-law entered first, exuding the same authoritative presence he always had. My wife followed, poised as if this were nothing more than a routine meeting. Then he walked in, the so-called new husband, young, self-assured, exactly the kind of replacement my father-in-law would deem worthy. He carried himself with a smug arrogance, radiating confidence as though he had already claimed victory. I nearly laughed at his assumption. My father-in-law spoke first, his tone laced with certainty. During the transition, I leaned back in my chair, fingers steepled, watching him with an expression of measured interest. The man beside my wife smirked, as if he found amusement in the situation. He had no idea what was coming. I disregarded him entirely. He was nothing more than a piece in someone else's scheme. My concern lay with the true threat that loomed before me. "We need you to oversee the transition," my father-in-law stated, his tone firm. I exhaled slowly, shaking my head. "You don't have the power to make that call," I said, my voice unervingly calm. A flicker of irritation crossed my wife's face, subtle but telling, while the smug grin on her new husband's face faltered ever so slightly. Without another word, I reached for the remote on my desk and pressed a button. The large screen behind me illuminated, displaying the executive shareholder agreement. Their gazes snapped to the document, initial confusion quickly giving way to panic. It clearly states that any transfer of control requires the approval of the majority shareholder, I remarked, watching as realization dawned on them. For the first time, the silence in the room was broken by my father-in-law's loss of composure. His mask of control cracked as he muttered, "This isn't possible." "What's actually impossible," I countered, letting the tension simmer, "is that you didn't see this coming." I turned my attention to my wife, disappointment evident in my expression. "Did you really think I wouldn't anticipate this?" She remained silent. The quiet stretched between us before I turned to the man standing beside her, the one who had foolishly walked in believing he was about to claim an empire. "You have two choices," I informed him evenly. "You can either work under me, or you can walk away and never set foot in this company again." His face flushed with frustration, his jaw tightening. He darted a glance at my wife before shifting his focus to my father-in-law. The older man hesitated only a moment before storming out, unwilling to admit defeat. My wife, however, lingered a fraction longer, her fingers curled into tense fists. She wasn't accustomed to losing, and neither was her father. But today, they had lost. Still, I knew this was just a beginning. Finally, she spoke. "You knew all along." Her voice wavered, and I tilted my head, considering her words. What exactly did I know? My voice was soft, yet cutting. She stiffened, then scoffed. "Don't play dumb. You were aware of my father's plans." She stopped herself, but I merely exhaled, tapping my fingers against the desk. "Of course I knew," I murmured smoothly. "Your father is predictable. He thinks power can be shuffled like a deck of cards." Her lips pressed into a thin line. "You underestimated me," I added, watching her reaction. "Just as he did." "It doesn't have to be a battle," she offered. I chuckled, but it was devoid of humor. Her eyes flickered toward the contract still displayed on the screen, the document that had dismantled their carefully laid plans. She hadn't moved, but I could see her mind racing. "Do you really think you can?" she began. I slowly rose from my seat, stepping around the desk, my tone quieter now. "Your father no longer controls this company," I stated. "I do. If you insist on continuing this fight, it will be played by my rules." She narrowed her eyes. "You don't own me." "No," I agreed, a small, knowing smile forming. "But I do control what matters. And if you thought I would simply step aside and let you take everything I built, you were mistaken." Her new husband clenched his jaw, his frustration barely concealed. My wife's mask of confidence wavered as she whispered, "You don't know me as well as you think." I saw right through her. Beneath the bravado, she was afraid, not of losing today, but of what would come next. Her voice carried a desperate edge. "This isn't over." I smiled faintly. "Oh, I know. This is only the beginning." She turned abruptly and stormed out, slamming the door behind her. Rolling my shoulders back, I let out a slow breath. The first battle was won, but I was already laying the groundwork for what came next. This was the start of their downfall.